Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. Our lakefront property has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandparents purchased it back in the 1950s when the area was mostly undeveloped wilderness. Growing up, I spent every summer there, fishing off our small wooden pier and watching spectacular sunsets over the water. While I now live about an hour away in my primary residence, I still visit the property frequently on weekends and holidays, keeping it well maintained while planning to build my dream retirement home there in the next few years. The lot itself is quite valuable, about 2 acres with 200 feet of prime waterfront. Until recently, it remained largely natural except for the pier and a small storage shed. I've intentionally preserved the natural landscape, including a magnificent old oak tree that my grandfather planted when he first bought the property. Everything was peaceful until about 3 years ago, when new neighbors moved in next door. From day one, they made it clear they thought they were above everyone else in the neighborhood. The wife especially had this insufferable way of looking down her nose at anyone she deemed beneath her social status. At first, they were merely annoying, complaining about my unmaintained natural shoreline, suggesting I should install a manicured lawn like theirs, and making snide comments about how I was wasting such prime real estate by not building on it immediately. I mostly ignored them and maintained cordial but distant relations. That all changed last spring when I had to travel for work for several weeks. When I returned for my usual weekend visit, I couldn't believe my eyes. There, sitting on my property, was a partially constructed 3-car garage with a second-story boat storage area. The structure was positioned to take full advantage of the lake view while completely blocking mine. I immediately marched over to the neighbor's house and knocked on their door. The wife answered with that signature condescending smile of hers. "Oh, hello," she said, as if nothing was wrong. "I suppose you're here about the improvement we're making." "Improvement?" I sputtered. "You're building a garage on my property," she waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be dramatic. That land has just been sitting there unused. We're actually doing you a favor by developing it properly. This will increase property values for everyone." "That's not your decision to make," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I have the property surveys and deed. That land belongs to me." "Well," she sniffed, "we spoke to someone at the city who said it would be fine, and honestly, it's not like you ever use that section anyway. You're barely even here." At that moment, her husband emerged from their garage. "Is there a problem?" he asked, coming to stand beside his wife. "Yes, there's a problem," I replied. "You're building a structure on my property without permission. You need to stop construction immediately." He crossed his arms. "Look, we've already invested significant money in this project. The foundation is poured and the framing is nearly complete. Be reasonable. This benefits everyone. That eyesore of a natural shoreline needed improvement anyway." "I don't care how much you've spent," I said firmly. "It's my property and I want construction stopped immediately." "Or what?" the wife challenged. "Are you going to sue us?" "Good luck with that. We have excellent lawyers." I noticed several other neighbors had emerged from their homes to watch the confrontation. The wife seemed to gain confidence from the audience. "Besides," she added loudly, "you verbally agreed to this project months ago. Everyone here knows that." That was a bold-faced lie, and I told her so. But I could see some neighbors nodding along with her version of events. It became clear this would require more than just a conversation to resolve. The next few weeks were incredibly frustrating. I hired a lawyer and sent formal cease and desist letters, which they ignored. I filed complaints with the city's building department, only to discover they had never even applied for construction permits. Yet somehow, construction continued, and the garage was completed despite my protests. To add insult to injury, they began using the structure immediately, parking their expensive boats and water toys inside. They even hosted a neighborhood barbecue to show off their new waterfront garage, making sure to invite everyone except me. But I'm a patient person, and I believe in doing things the right way. My lawyer and I methodically built our case. We got multiple property surveys done, documenting beyond any doubt that the garage was on my land. We took photos and videos of the construction process and collected statements from contractors who had worked on the project. Most importantly, we secured a court order confirming my property rights and my legal authority to remove the structure. I also made sure to file all the necessary demolition permits. Unlike my neighbors, I believe in following proper procedures. Then came the moment of truth. On a crisp Saturday morning, just as the sun was rising, I arranged for a demolition crew to arrive. I also had a police officer present on my lawyer's advice to ensure everything proceeded legally and safely. The sound of heavy equipment pulling up must have woken the neighbors because they burst out of their house in their pajamas. The wife's face turned from confusion to rage when she saw the demolition crew preparing their equipment. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, running toward us. "Stop this immediately." I calmly handed her a copy of the court order. This structure is being legally demolished as it was built without permits on my property. You can't do this, she turned to her husband. Do something! He was already on his phone, presumably calling their lawyer. Meanwhile, she attempted to physically block the demolition crew, positioning herself between them and the garage. The police officer stepped forward. Ma'am, I need you to step aside. They have legal authorization to proceed with this demolition. Do you know who we are? She demanded. We'll sue you all. Feel free to contact my lawyer, I replied, watching as the demolition crew began their work. Though you might want to save your money for the city fines you're facing for building without permits. Other neighbors began emerging from their houses, drawn by the commotion. This time, though, the atmosphere was different. As they witnessed the wife's hysterical behavior and heard about the court order and missing permits, I could see the tide of neighborhood opinion turning. The demolition was actually quite impressive to watch. The crew worked efficiently, and by mid-afternoon there was nothing left of the illegal garage except a concrete slab that would be removed the following week. The wife had retreated inside their house hours ago, but not before screaming that we'd regret this and that we were ruining the neighborhood. The aftermath was even more satisfying than the demolition itself. The city fined them heavily for the unauthorized construction. Their insurance company refused to cover any of their losses since the structure was built illegally. When they tried to rally support from other neighbors, they found most people had lost sympathy for them after learning the full story. One neighbor, who had initially believed their lies about my verbal agreement, actually came over to apologize. I should have known better, she said. They told us so many stories about you, but looking back, none of them made sense. I'm sorry we didn't support you sooner. I hired a landscape architect to restore the natural beauty of my waterfront. We replanted native species and added some tasteful stone pathways that actually improved the property while maintaining its natural character. The work cost considerably less than what my neighbors had spent on their ill-fated garage project. The best part? I finally moved forward with my plans to build my retirement home. I hired an architect who designed a beautiful house that works with the natural landscape instead of against it. The plans include plenty of windows to take advantage of those sunset views I've loved since childhood. The entitled neighbors couldn't handle their humiliation. Within 6 months, they put their house on the market and moved away. I heard through the grapevine that they had trouble selling because potential buyers kept asking about the illegal garage incident. Before starting construction on my new house, I installed security cameras and had surveyors place permanent boundary markers around my property. I also had my lawyer draft a letter detailing the property boundaries and history, which I share with any new neighbors who move in nearby. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Looking back, I'm glad I handled everything legally and professionally, even though it took longer. There's something deeply satisfying about watching justice unfold properly. Yes, it required patience and documentation, but seeing their entitled attitudes crumble made it all worthwhile. Now, as I sit on my pier watching another gorgeous sunset over the lake, I can enjoy the view without any illegal structures blocking it. The natural shoreline continues to be home to local wildlife, just as it was when my grandparents first bought this property. Sometimes, standing up for what's right isn't just about protecting your own interests, it's about preserving something precious for future generations. The whole experience taught me an important lesson. Entitled people often count on others giving in just to avoid conflict. But when you stand firm, follow the law, and document everything, justice has a way of prevailing. It may not happen as quickly as we'd like, but watching karma unfold in real time is worth the wait. My grandfather used to say that good things come to those who do things the right way. As I watch my retirement home taking shape on this property that holds so many family memories, I know he was right. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about staying true to your principles and letting the law take its course. And you know what? Every time I look out at my unobstructed water view, I smile thinking about how their arrogance quite literally crumbled before their eyes. Sometimes life's greatest lessons come with a hefty price tag, especially when you build on someone else's property. The next one is a malicious compliances story. This happened to me a while back, but just came back to me. I used to work for an armored car company, something I did for a few years when I was in university and waiting for a position in what would be my future career. It was good money, and lots of people did it as their full-time jobs, but I wanted more out of life than a mindless job. Because I was classified as part-time, I did not have a set shift. I mostly covered for people when they were sick, took vacation, worked unscheduled shifts, or worked shifts created specifically for part-timers. All in all, I was working full-time hours almost every week. Most of the full-timers loved working with me. The way the company worked, you were set for a 13-hour shift. However, if you managed to complete your run is less than that, you'd still get paid the full shift. I was young, moved fast, and didn't care about breaks if it meant I could get paid for 3-4 hours to sit at home instead of working. So whenever I took over for someone older who was just on autopilot, I could get their coworker home in a fraction of the time. One of the full-time workers, a real Karen, let's call him Kyle, was just the worst. For some reason, he took it upon himself to tattle on people for anything that he didn't like. If someone weren't wearing their collared shirt under their sweater, run to tell management. FYI, working in the summer heat in a literal metal box wearing a bulletproof vest makes you want to shed layers. Someone wearing black instead of blue pants. Tells management. Someone wearing a company hat that has the company logo but is not official uniform. Tells management. No one in the company liked Kyle. Well, one week, Kyle's coworker has taken vacation, and my boss schedules me to replace him. The run is pretty easy. It's commercial day shift, so 90% of the stops are retail stores with less than a few $100 in cash. Because of the amount of money, no one has ever had a problem with one person jumping out and running in, grabbing the money and coming back, while the second person, usually the driver, stays with the truck. In this shift, I was the driver, so that's what I did. When Kyle was in the store, I would just navigate my phone, look at the people in the area, make sure there were no threats, make sure I wasn't parked in anyone's way, mostly wasting time. Well, one stop, Kyle came back, and I was just finishing up writing an email. Apparently, Kyle wasn't too happy with me taking a few extra seconds to start going. Too unbeknownst to me took a picture of me behind the wheel on my phone. I had no idea until the next shift came the next day, where management came to talk to me about texting and driving. I told them I had no idea what they were talking about, and my manager just said that he had proof I was doing it, and if I did it again, I would be written up. I went to talk to another coworker who is also the union rep to figure out what the hell was going on, and he told me Kyle took a picture of me yesterday and complained that I was doing it. I was pissed. Cue malicious compliance. My shifts with Kyle were 3 13-hour shifts, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Well, today was now Thursday, our last shift of this run, and this shift was not retail pickups. It was the run that takes all the money collected from the previous week and brings it to our provincial depot about 400 kilometers away. The entire run only has about 30 minutes of work and about 9 hours of driving. If you did the math, this is one of those runs where if you get it done quickly, if traffic is on your side, you can get paid for a lot of unworked time. It was also the last shift of the week, which meant a long, gorgeous weekend in the middle of summer as soon as we were done. Well, I was going to make sure this shift lasted as long as possible. If he didn't want me to break any rules, I'd make sure I obliged. I drove exactly the speed limit the entire way. I even stopped for our 1-hour lunch break, which is given to us, but I had not witnessed anyone take in the years I'd been here because of the rules we had about pay. In fact, we were so behind, we reached the major city our depot was located in right at rush hour, something our early start time was designed to prevent. All in all, what should have taken about 9 hours to do, ended up taking 14, an extra 5 hours where he just had to sit there and watch me in silence. To make things sweeter, a few times during the shift he had to call his wife and let her know he wouldn't be home early enough to go to the cottage and they would have to leave the next day instead. I heard from other workers how furious he was and how I'd ruined his plans for the weekend, and all I could do was smile. To clarify, where I live, going 15 to 20 kilometers per h above the speed limit is standard. Going to speed limit will just get someone smashing into your rear bumper. Also, our trucks have a max speed of 105 kilometers per h, and most of the drive is either 80 kilometers per h or 100 kilometers per h. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I, 35M, have a young brother, Todd, 29M, who had a complicated birth and had to stay a month in the ICU, and because of that my parents have always doted on him and almost denied him nothing, even if it was to the detriment of my sister Abby, 32F, and I. My brother drinks in on the attention and has on more than one occasion made himself the center of attention at either my sister's, or a cousin's special event. Because of this, Abby and I have a strained relationship with Todd and our parents. Unfortunately, Todd met and fell in love with Lucy, 24F, who announced her own pregnancy at the baby shower my mom held for Abby. When I proposed to my wife Michelle, 30F, I just wanted to elope, but she really wanted her family to be there, so I invited my family out of obligation. While out, my best man, Jim, 35M, noticed a receipt from a jewelry store slipped out of Todd's pocket. Jim confronted Todd about this, which led to an argument. Jim told me everything, and I told Todd that he was no longer going to be a groomsman because I knew he was going to propose at my wedding. Todd cried to our parents, and which led to a blowout. In my parents' eyes, since Todd never admitted that he was going to propose to Lucy at my wedding, I was unfairly judging him. I refused and brought up Todd's past behavior. My parents couldn't refute this and got Todd to agree to not try anything at my wedding. This wasn't enough to convince me to let him be a groomsman, but I warned him that if, as a guest, he'd try anything, I would make him regret it. Fast forward to the wedding, and surprise, surprise, Todd walked over to Lucy and proposed to her during Michelle's father-daughter dance and did it in a way so that everyone would notice. Cue my revenge. Jim and I had hired a woman to pretend to be Todd's side piece who cornered Todd and Lucy and claimed that she was pregnant with his baby. Todd denied this, but when she called his phone, I gave her his number and messed with Todd's phone to incriminate him. It didn't look good. Lucy threw the ring back at Todd and left in tears. When Todd saw the smile on my face, he knew that it was me, and I didn't respond to a single call, text from him or my parents until after the honeymoon. Lucy has thrown Todd's stuff out and has been denying access to their kid. Todd is furious and is demanding that I clear his name. I sent him a text saying that I had no idea what he was talking about, as well as a screenshot of a bill for the wedding, and gave a vague message demanding reimbursement for half of the wedding costs. Michelle knew the whole time what I was planning and gave me the green light after Todd ruined her moment with her dad. So I felt pretty good, but now even Abby thinks I went too far. The next one is an entitled people story. As the title says, this happened quite a few years ago when I, 30F, was a kid, under 10 years old. But the entitlement still stings. My parents were in the middle of a nasty divorce. My dad had moved several hours' drive away and was now living with the other party cause of divorce, named in the solicitor's papers, aka my stepmother. Even though I was only a kid, I was semi-aware of what was really going on. It wasn't the first time my dad had moved out because of another woman, but it was the first time the word divorce had been mentioned. In the past, he had always come home after a few weeks, full of apologies. So when my stepmother first met me and loudly declared, "Call me Mum," I was immediately in her bad books by saying, "No thank you." But her entitlement only got worse. While Dad was in the process of moving in with my stepmother and sorting custody of me with Mum and solicitors, he would sometimes take me out on day trips, but stepmother always came too, and I became her little project. I wasn't the prettiest kid, but Mum had always said I should enjoy being a kid and not worry about looks for now. In contrast, stepmother's kids, one older than me, one younger, both wore makeup and dressed like they were going to a nightclub, and as stepmother's little project, I had to look like I was going clubbing too. My clothes would be removed as soon as she saw me and replaced with crop tops and mini skirts. She'd sit me down and force my hair into plaits with hair gel. And my original clothes would always conveniently go missing when it was home time, but my mum couldn't play that game with my new trashy clothes, as if a single hair clip I had been forced to wear went missing, then Dad would be calling up on stepmother's behalf and talking about solicitors and police for theft of property. A custody arrangement was eventually worked out as me living full-time with Mum, staying with Dad for the school holidays. And that first and last week was rough on me. In all fairness, my dad did try to keep me entertained, but I wasn't used to living with other children. I was an only child. That plus sleeping in a strange place after never being away from my mum for my whole life equals an uncomfortable situation. After a few days, I confessed, privately, to my dad that I missed Mum. Now I can see how that would hurt his feelings, but I wasn't asking to go home. I was actually angling to use his mobile to call her. I had used the stepmother's landline the day before, but she had hovered, listening the whole time, and it just felt awkward. Dad looked upset, but told me to go and eat some lunch, and off I went. And here's where stepmother's entitled behavior exploded. Sitting next to my stepsister, I suddenly had a plate slapped down in front of me by my stepmother. "There!" I was confused, but said thank you and started to eat. Throughout the meal, she started making snide comments in my direction while talking to her daughter. Things like, "Ah, well done, sweetheart. See, you'll never disappoint me, unlike someone I know." I was a very timid kid, so I don't know where I got the burst of confidence to say something, but I said, "Is something wrong?" And stepmother snapped back, "You know what, Op? Your father is very important to me, and you've really hurt his feelings." I tried to explain, but she snatched my plate and stalked out the room. I followed her, still hungry, and tried to take my plate back, but she just unleashed on me. Standing in the hallway with this almost a stranger screaming in my face is something I'm never going to forget. I was apparently an ungrateful brat, and she washed her hands of me. I burst into tears and completely shrank into myself as she just kept screaming. A little reminder. I was a child under 10 years old, and she was over 30. My only crime was missing my mother. I honestly think that she should have been the adult here and had a bit of empathy. How entitled do you have to be think it's okay to go crazy at a sobbing kid? So yeah, not something I'm likely to forget. End result, I got taken home that day, several hours driving with Dad, sat in total bone-crushing silence. It did damage our relationship, unfortunately. While stepmother was squawking the house down, I vividly remember seeing him, through my waterfall of tears, standing at the top of the stairs, watching us and saying nothing. I have no idea what he said to my mom to explain why I was home 2 days early, but I never spoke to her about it. Today is actually the first time I've spoken about it, other than to my husband when we first met and were swapping awful family stories. Fortunately, the only 2 occasions I've seen my stepmother in the 2 decades since has been at family gatherings where we've happily ignored each other. Edit. Just correcting some spelling mistakes and saying wow and thank you guys so much for the outpouring of love. It really helped me to see things clearly. Up until now, I suppose I was gaslighting myself into thinking I somehow deserved her shouting at me like she did. I just wanted to add a detail, post-blow-up. The custody arrangement changed after that day. I never stayed at or visited stepmother's house again. Instead, it was agreed that Dad would pick me up from school every other Friday, and we would stay with his parents until Sunday afternoon when he'd drop me back with Mum. And honestly, it was always awkward from there, mostly because I was resentful that he didn't jump in and defend me against stepmother. I still don't know why he didn't, as he had always, and still does if he's getting sentimental, said that if anyone spoke to me like that, or ever hurt me, he'd beat them up. See where my gaslighting comes from? He always said he'd be on my side, so the fact that he wasn't must mean I really deserved it, etc., etc. Also, my dad and stepmother weren't married at the time of the entitlement explosion. They got married a few months later, on holiday abroad. I was invited, but my invitation arrived only a week before they were due to leave, and it was half-hearted at that. Dad blamed the solicitors for not delivering the message quickly enough. Even though they were divorced, by then the situation was still very hostile, and messages were passed via solicitors for about a year post-divorce. Mum was keen to keep things official for a while, as Dad tended to get overly and loudly offended at everything. One time, he dropped me off with Mum, they started arguing, and her new boyfriend got involved. Then the following week, a solicitor's letter appeared, claiming their party had been injured by the harassment. Mum wasn't keen on me attending their wedding, too many horror stories of kids getting abducted by a parent during or following a divorce. So I said, no thank you, and didn't go. I'd have looked out of place anyway. Full disclosure. Though I do still love my dad, we get on well when we chat via text occasionally, but we don't see each other much. I just don't like the majority of his choices, stepmother being a big fat one. Literally, Dad always used to gloat about how sexy she was to my mum, how he had traded up, about how her stomach was flat and her belly button pierced, whereas my skinny mum still had a saggy belly from having me. Stepmother, of course, reveled in his compliments. I always remember her swinging her red hair around in a really exaggerated way whenever he said how gorgeous she was. Tables have turned, though, over 2 decades later, and my mum looks exactly the same as she did back then, except for gray hair. But stepmother is now rather big, and her red hair is now really red, clearly out of a box. Evil laugh. The 2 occasions in 2 decades that I've seen stepmother went like this. The first was a family party for grandparents' 60th wedding anniversary. In front of everyone, she exclaimed, "Up!" and kissed my cheeks like she was thrilled to see me, but then ignored me when everyone stopped looking. My grandparents are very proud people and clearly didn't tell extended relatives that their son had got divorced and remarried. For the whole day, people kept saying to me, "Oh, you're blank's daughter, your mum looks different, her red hair looks interesting," and I had great fun repeating the phrase, "That's definitely not my mum." Dad left her for that one. Never found out if Dad or stepmother heard. I avoided them throughout and left early. The second time was my wedding. Stepmother was absolutely not invited. It was just meant to be a tiny ceremony. Parents only, bye. But Dad called a few days before and pleaded, "Just for the ceremony, not the reception. Don't worry, you won't know she's there." For some background, my mother-in-law had already kind of taken over, and our parents' only wedding suddenly included a lot of her relatives. So I just shrugged, thinking whatever, nothing's really how I wanted anyway, so why not? A lot to unpack there. I might do a few posts on my mother-in-law's entitlement. True to his word, Dad and stepmother didn't interact with anyone and left immediately after. Although stepmother couldn't resist a tiny flash of entitlement by bringing her own camera. Note, my mum didn't attend the wedding after hearing that my dad was invited. Also, she was very ill at the time, so she obviously didn't want Dad to see her that way, but we visited her after the reception and I gave her my bouquet, which was nice. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.